Hello, everyone. This episode correlates to IB topic 6, which is human physiology, and it specifically goes along with 6.3, which is defense against infectious diseases. This specific video is going to go over the immune system and how it responds to different pathogens. So remember, pathogens are foreign, trouble causing things like bacteria or viruses. It could be either one of those, they're both pathogens. The first thing we're going to be going over is our primary, which is otherwise known as our first line of defense that we have against pathogenic bacteria and viruses. This includes our skin and our mucous membranes. Our primary response to an immune attack is otherwise known as nonspecific immunity because it's trying to block out all pathogens, not just a specific one. So, therefore, it's nonspecific. The skin and mucus layers prevent pathogens from getting into the body. First off, the skin is there to protect us. It has two layers, the living dermis and the epidermis, which is made up of a bunch of dead skin cells. The dermis is the underneath layer, and the epidermis is the top layer, and that's the one made of dead skin cells. These dead skin cells are actually a good mechanism for fighting off pathogens because many pathogens want to attack our cells. And because these cells are dead, they can't be attacked. Now, if there's a cut on the skin, that's how a pathogen can get in, which is why it's important to keep your skin hydrated. It's less likely to get cut that way. We also have mucous membranes wherever we have openings that go directly into the body, such as the mucous membrane in the urethra or in the nose, which has a sticky mucus to hopefully trap and hold on to any pathogens before they can get into our system. Again, this is our first line of defense, and it is non specific immunity. Our second line of defense is phagocytes, which are also a type of non specific immune response. So, once a pathogen gets into the body, our second line of defense immediately gets to work. No matter what the pathogen is, phag- phagocytes, which are a type of leukocyte, white blood cell, will try to change their shape so that they surround the pathogen and can eat them and break them down. They do this with any cells that are foreign to the body, which is why it's a non specific form of immunity. They just go after about any pathogen. This is a secondary defense, and it often results in an inflammatory response, which may include things like swelling or a fever, for example. Sometimes when we talk about the immune system, we call phagocytes macrophages, which pretty much just means large phagocytes. This is again a type of leukocytic white blood cell. Hopefully, you've heard the word leukocyte before, which is something I have a picture of in the bottom right corner. That's our white blood cell. They will surround the pathogen when they're a phagocyte, and so when they surround the pathogen, they change their shape and they break that pathogen down. Phagocytes do this pretty efficiently because they have a lot of lysosomes in them. Lysosomes are an organelle that is used to break down and get rid of waste inside cells, so it makes sense that they have a lot of these. Our next understanding is about specific immunity adaptations that we have. And this is our third line of defense, which is the production of antibodies. And again, this is specific, not non-specific. So, this third line of defense is very specific to the pathogen that is invading the body through the production of antibodies. So, when talking about the immune system, a lot of times they'll refer to a pathogen as an antigen. It's just another word for it. So, for example, when you do a COVID self test, the test is looking for an antigen, which is pretty much just looking for the COVID virus, which is a type of pathogen. When something like the COVID antigen gets into the body, an immune response is triggered and antibodies are made. Antibodies are a Y shape, and the 2 points on the top of the Y attach to the antigen. But we need to know what creates the antibodies in the first place, and that is leukocytes. Leukocytes, again, are a white blood cell, and this time they're often called plasma cells, and we're going to talk about how they create antibodies next. So the picture on the top left is the antibody, And the video on the right is an antibody attaching to an antigen, which remember is just another word for a pathogen. The leukocytic white blood cell reads the outside of the antigen and notices it's foreign. So they send off an alarm for the third line of defense to step up. Plasma cells, which again are just a white blood cell, start making antibodies, which is what we saw in the video on the last slide. That was the antibodies being made from the white blood cell. More and more plasma cells start to replicate, and this allows a lot of antibodies to be released into the bloodstream. When the antigen and the antibody meet up, like in this video, the antibody gets rid of the pathogen. Some of these plasma cells that made the antibodies become memory cells, and they stick around in the bloodstream for a while to make sure that the pathogen doesn't come back. Sometimes this period of having a memory cell for an antigen isn't a super long amount of time, which is why vaccine boosters are necessary, or for example, why you uh, may lose your reaction or your immune response to COVID. They vaccine boosters use a similar technology, and we're going to talk about that a little more later. So, speaking of boosters, we need to talk about how immunity knowledge has led to the development of vaccines. And I promise we are almost done. We got one more slide. So, in vaccines, scientists will have a small amount of a pathogen, or a dead version of a pathogen, or the genetic material for a pathogen, and they're going to inject it into the patient. When it's injected, our body is allowed to make a specific immune response. So, this is our third line of defense that we're going to here. And we're allowed to create antibodies for the pathogen. Because we're injecting such a little amount, you may get a little sick, but not nearly as sick as you might normally. Sometimes it takes you a long time to get over an illness if you don't have a vaccine because you have a huge amount of pathogens in your body at once, and it takes a while for all the antibodies to be created. When vaccines are used instead, we prepare for the body, and we prepare our body for the potential threat of a pathogen and can have a much faster immune response than so when we eventually do catch something, we can respond to it very quickly. And that is it for this video. Please let me know if you have any questions.